Recording in progress.
All right, I'm going to go ahead. It is 3 o'clock, and it's the first time today I've been punctual, so I'd like to go ahead and get started. This is I'm going to call to order the Housing and Economic Development Committee for Wednesday, May 3rd. Legislator Pillar is running a few minutes behind, but she will be here, and we do have a quorum. So we do have one public comment. Teresa Alt is here with us in the chambers. If you'd like to come up to the microphone. Teresa, I know you're familiar with the rules of the public comment and the time limit, et cetera.
Is this on?
It is.
Okay, good. Yes, I am Teresa Alt of 206 Eddy Street in the city of Ithaca. I want to say thank you for the Department of Planning and Sustainability report on the Community Housing Development Fund Round 23 awards. I would love to thank the author by name, but I believe I'm not allowed to do that in my comment. The report is both concise and detailed, which enabled me to see what is problematic in it. The problem is what happens to the city of Ithaca. For background, nearly half of the real estate assessed in the city of Ithaca is tax exempt because it is owned by Cornell. You can imagine what high property taxes all city residents pay, whether directly or through their rent. For high property taxes, because only half of the city real estate is taxed. So it is upsetting to see the Industrial Development Agency, the IDA, give tax abatements which reduce city, school district, and also county tax revenues for new market rate or luxury housing developments in the city. And then the IDA boasts about how a small fraction of those abatements is paid into the Community Housing Development Fund and helps to fund less expensive housing anywhere in the county. So money goes out of the city into everywhere else. It would be better if the IDA just left city taxes to the city, especially when their abatements go to development for upscale living and not for better paying jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Thanks for joining us. I look to my colleagues to see if there's any changes to the agenda. No? All right, seeing none. The next item of business, we have the minute approval from April 5th, 2023, moved by Mike, seconded by Travis. Any comments or changes to those? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? All right, that passes unanimously. For the chair's report, I just want to remind everybody that after our meeting is the mac and cheese bowl. So you are all standing between me and a bowl of mac and cheese, or several bowls of mac and cheese, which is a FoodNet Meals on Wheels fundraiser down at the farmers market. Runs till 7 o'clock. So check that out. You'll likely see me there with mac and cheese down the front of me. I also wanted to note that our housing coordinator our homeless coordinator starts in the middle of the month, and have sort of slated right now for our June 7th meeting to be around the topic of homelessness, and we'll pull some more details together, but just kind of wanted to flag that for everybody as that's the current plan. I know Legislator Klein is also here with us as chair of HHS, Health and Human Services Committee, and would like to invite the members of that committee also to join us, since last year homelessness was a part of their committee and the continuum of care, and this year it falls within the Housing and Economic Development Committee. So looking forward to a robust meeting. If you don't, for other department heads or other reportees to this committee, if you don't have anything really pressing that can maybe wait till the July meeting, great. If not, we're happy to entertain whatever it is in June, but do want to try to make sure we have a significant amount of time in the June meeting to address and have some robust conversation and not overly pack the agenda. So try to plan accordingly, but obviously we'll make room for whatever's needed. That's all I have for the chair's report. County administrator report. We have Bridget with us.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Just a couple brief updates. So as was mentioned by the county administrator at last night's meeting, the congressionally directed spending requests that were submitted on behalf of the county have all been moved forward to the next phase and supported by both Senators Gillibrand and Schumer, which is great news. And additionally, the strategic operations planning process has kicked off for the county. It kicked off a couple of weeks ago with a small steering committee, and we're in the process of compiling a list of stakeholders, and the first deliverable will be an environmental scan. So we'll work from that information and keep everyone updated on that process as it moves forward. And that's everything for today.
Great. I failed to mention that we have Lori Scarrett with us, who is our new Director of Finance on day 3. So welcome to you. Obviously, open invitation anytime to this committee, as everybody has, but appreciate you joining us today. If you have any questions, by any means, feel free to jump in and be part of the discussion. Thank you. All right, next we're on to workforce development. We have a report discussion, Office of Workforce Development, departmental update, and labor market discussion, ID 11667. That's presented by Christopher Spahn, the Interim Director of Workforce Development. So, Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
Let me just bring up the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you for having me. It's great to see everyone again in person. So really, I'm just going to go over some labor market data that comes from the New York State Department of Labor. That's something that we get every month. I say it's brief because it is brief.
About 4 inches.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I say it's brief because it is pretty brief compared to like what they give us, but I kind of looked at the unemployment rates and other trends that I wanted to share. So this is the labor data profile for Ithaca MSA March 2023. So Ithaca MSA is just really, it's basically Tompkins County also, because basically everyone can commute within a reasonable distance. So when looking at that, the total non-farm jobs were 63,900. And if you combine the total private and government, that's how you come up with the total non-farm total for those jobs. When looking at those jobs, 60,100 of them are service providing. So that would be like hospitality. The leading way here is educational and health services at 33,500. And then on the right, you can see our unemployment rate is at 2.4% for March 2023. So basically what you do is you take the amount of people unemployed and then you divide it by who's in the labor force. So that's where we're at. Last year at this time, we were at 2.7%. When really looking at those numbers, though, the labor force includes all civilian workers 16 years and older who are employed, and then plus all civilian workers who are unemployed. So people not included in the labor force can be people in military, in prison, people in nursing homes, retirees, stay-at-home parents, also people who are just discouraged and not in the work. They're not applying to jobs anymore. They've been out of the market for like over a month. So that's also, they wouldn't be in part of the labor force. So that's where those numbers really come from. And as you can see, the New York State unemployment's at 4%, and then the US unemployment's at 3.6%. So we're in a pretty good position right now. And then the next slide is just going over, these are the metro areas throughout New York State. So as you can see, we're in the middle. We're at 2.4%. That's metro area also being like all of Tompkins County, like I said earlier. But that's just the snapshot I want to provide for the metro areas throughout the state and how that looks. Elmira's at 3.7%. So this is ranking all the counties throughout the state at the unemployment rate. So we are at the top, which is great. But also we know that there's stories behind those numbers. It's 2.4%, but we do know there's people not in the workforce anymore. There's people that could have jobs, but you know, it may not be a job that leads to more opportunities. They may have multiple jobs. That job may have really bad hours and things like that. So really, it's obviously, this is a good metric to see. It's like an economic indicator that areas have. But also, it's important to like also look at like, dig deeper into those details, like what are the quality of those jobs, are there pathways? You could even look for, I mean, hypothetically speaking, we could look further by gender and race, like how are those certain communities affected with these numbers. So I also think it's always important to have that in mind when you're kind of just looking at these numbers that come out, because there's more stories behind those numbers. And then this is for our visual learners. It just shows the unemployment rate throughout the state. So as you can see, if your unemployment rate is below 3%, then you're dark blue. So Tompkins is dark blue. And then you can see that there's gray and then light blue. So that's how like our neighbors look compared to us. So we're a little different, but again, that's how it looks throughout the area. And although we're under 3%, there's always more work to do. And then this is just, this is for the southern tier actually. And this is like this is for a decade basically. And this just shows blue is the New York State unemployment rate, yellow southern tier region, and then red is the United States. So as you can see, like usually we go with our region goes with the flow. Like the form is very similar compared to the state and the country as a whole. During the pandemic, you know, the numbers are a little different, but basically the form is still there. So really, whatever's going on nationally, it usually applies to here too. There's nothing like really different going on and things like that. So a lot of the challenges that we have are also challenges that people face throughout the country. But that's how it looks historically for our area. And then this is actually in our labor report that we get also. This is the southern tier region age breakdown. And I thought it was important just to share because I found it to be interesting. So on the left, we have the southern tier, and then on the right, New York State. So when looking at 65 years and over, we have 20% of our population, and then for New York State, it's 17.4%. 45 to 64 is 25.8%, so both mimic each other, the southern tier and the state. But then when you look at 25 to 44 years, that's our sweet spot. We're at 22.7% for the southern tier, and then 27.2% for the state. So I guess like two things really when looking at this. When looking at our older workers, there's a lot of labor that we can tap into, a lot of talent, a lot of experiences, and I feel as if that's an area that's overlooked, and that's something that we should be focusing on. I know I was talking with Jennifer Tavares of the Chambers, and she was also talking about wanting to engage older workers, because really, you know, a lot of times we hear we need to upskill people, we need to give them these different opportunities, and it's really directed towards young people, which is actually great, but also a lot of times when those discussions are happening, like we're not really thinking about older workers, or they're not really part of the discussion, they're not really at the table. So I think that's just something to kind of reflect on because that's a big portion of the population in the area. And then with the 25 to 44, we basically want them to stay here. Like we want them to have opportunities to stay here because that's really our future for the county as a whole. And we're already kind of small. Our percentage is already kind of small compared to the statewide averages. So that's just also something that we need. That's something that our department's working on. We try to collaborate with who we can, is trying to engage our younger population, making sure they have opportunities, and making sure that they stay here ultimately because like this is like the cold hard reality with the numbers here. So this is really going to be coming up pretty soon. So that's just something we're thinking about, and I just thought that was interesting to share in our report. But in regards to the labor market report, that's about all that I'm talking about right now. If you have any questions, you can ask me or you can email me to follow up if you want more information. And then if you don't have any questions now, then I can just move on into our department updates.
Ann?
Just a quick question. Thank you for all this information, Chris. On that slide right there with the southern tier age breakdown compared to New York State with the age bracket, I can't remember what the kind of the teal, the third, well, let's see, the 12.6%. So that's 18 to 24. Would you say that's having a lot to do with the colleges here?
Yeah, that could be, that's part of it too. And I can follow up with like the exact breakdown of all that, because it can get pretty crazy when breaking down the numbers. So I was talking to our labor market analysis, Christian Harris, and I was asking him similar questions too. And that's kind of like things where it's not like readily available at the moment, but I can like look into it and follow up with you about that. But yeah, that definitely does contribute to a certain regard.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions for Chris on this topic? All right, Mike? No? Okay. If you want to go into your next topic, Chris?
Yeah, so I'll go on to the updates. So last week, I went to the Micron Future Ready Workforce Innovation Consortium. So basically, that has to do with up in Syracuse with Micron coming. And they're basically collecting a bunch of different community members and partners to kind of come up with a strategy and like how are we going to do this going forward. So we had people from community colleges, local colleges, Syracuse University, Micron executives were there, workforce board directors, and just really other relevant parties involved. So mainly the gist of it was that there's going to be 9,000 jobs and we don't have enough people to fill them, and people need to get the skills to fill those jobs, basically. So really that's the whole purpose of this consortium, is kind of focusing on that, really. And really, like, you kind of wonder, like, why is Tompkins County there? So, like, in a way, we're just trying to create an ecosystem and a network of partners that can kind of just collaborate and work together. And we may be able to support them in, like, construction jobs, or maybe at TC3 we may have programs that people can take, and then they can get those skills and then get a job at Micron, really. You know, big picture, it's like we want our workers to stay here and work for our people. So that's really something we have in mind also, but we can also find opportunities where people can work there and come back here. But we can also use this consortium platform as ways to come up with strategies to kind of implement them in our area too. So it's not like we're wasting our time going up there, because, you know, I know a lot of times people are like, Micron's all about Syracuse and that. But we're just trying to find our place in that regard, and just strategizing on where we can help. So I know Danny Zabel was there of IAED, Heather was there, Jeff Madison from TSC BOCES, and then Carrie Whitmore from TC3 was there also. So we also have our like kind of like a subcommittee where we'll be working together, just talking about on issues related to that. Next, we have the Youth Employment Resource Team that we run. So basically, it's a bunch of community partners that come together every month through Zoom, and we talk about workforce issues related to youth. So it's a really great opportunity for people just to connect and talk. Right now, we're going to be working on a kind of just analyzing the area and seeing like what issues youth face, what are some of the biggest challenges, like how can we best support them. Really, the purpose of this is to kind of just chronicle like the challenges that our youth are facing, and really just laying everything out and seeing where our resources are overlapping and seeing how we can best support each other, and kind of just making a better ecosystem. And then also coming up with solutions just to share with the community, and really just the purpose is just to chronicle this, have something that's shareable, and be like, hey, like this is what we're working on and this is what we're going towards. So we're just starting talks with that. Along with that, we have our Services to Individuals with Disabilities Committee. That's part of our workforce board. And you know, there's just discussions about the open meetings law and how a person with a disability wouldn't be able to be part of a quorum. And I know that there's discussions going on with that in New York State. That's just something I wanted to share also, that our committee definitely would want some more flexibility on that. And I know that we can only control so much, but I also thought it was important that with these open meetings laws and being for the people and people from all different backgrounds, I think it's important that, you know, and a lot of times it's a safety reason too, that someone should be counted as part of the quorum if they have a disability and they're not able to make it in person and things like that. So I just thought that was important to mention, because we all agree that, you know, it can be a challenge for people to come, and really we are for the public, so that's just something we want to work towards. I have a couple more updates and then we'll be done with me. So the Made Manufacturing Expo and Healthcare Expo, that's something that we collaborate with partners and we lead. So that's gonna come up in the fall. The purpose of those events are just to provide career exposure to youth, the ones in manufacturing and then the other ones in healthcare. So high schools from all over the area come and they can go to different tables, like there'd be Borg Warner, Caterpillar. They go to each table for like 15 minutes, and then they just learn more about the job, what they can do, possible career paths. And then at the Healthcare Expo, there's an interactive exhibit hall where they can go to different tables again and learn more about healthcare careers, and then there's kind of like info sessions for them to attend to too. So we're very excited about that, and we've been planning that. Along with that, the Tompkins Workforce Board is working on a new workforce strategy. In the past, Julia Maddox, she developed a strategy, and that was back in like 2018 or something. So we've had COVID and things like that. So collectively as a group, we're gonna be going through that, talking about it. I'm working with Danny from IAED also on that, because in the past, those two collaborated on this project. But really, it's like, technically we're kind of like organizing, but really it's just a collective as a group. So that's like really what a lot of the partners in the community will be working on in the coming months. It's gonna take a while to put together, but that's something that's in the works. And along with that, I also went to the Direct to Work program that Danny Zay was running, and I recommend that for the summer cohort that you all check it out. It was really great to meet the people involved and just see them grow just over those 4 weeks. It was just very exciting to see, very empowering. It's just great to just see that opportunity given to them. And I was there when they were interviewing initially, and just to see the growth. It's just a really great program, and I definitely recommend everyone checks that out in the summer. Along with that, I have two more things. We completed our fiscal audit with the New York State Department of Labor, so I'd like to thank Diane, our fiscal coordinator, in supporting that part. So we are done with our audit and everything for the year, and then we'll have that again in the fall. And then finally, I just wanted to add that transportation has been an issue for a lot of people we work with. I know that there's employers that, there's a lot of employers out there who have a lot of great opportunities for people, but it's very hard for people to get to those jobs just because of transportation. So that's like an issue that's really hurting us in workforce development as a whole. Even in the Direct to Work program, I've met a couple great people who had trouble. They were able to still do the program, but they had to use public transit, and like it just took a while for them to get there. And there were some people who weren't able to do the program just because of transit. So I just found that's a very important area that I hope that, I know that we can only do so much in our positions, and I would hope that y'all can also just advocate for better public transit in any way that you can, because it really affects our department and our workforce strategy of what we're trying to do. But that's just one last thing I wanted to add. And those are all my updates.
All right, sounds like there's nothing going on.
No, not really.
No, very, very exciting. I'm joking. I have a few questions, but I'll hold those back and give my committee members a chance to ask any questions that they may have first, if they do have any. Or I can start.
I had two, but
okay,
I could
go
wait
ahead
if other people do. I don't need to. Okay. So two things I'm thinking off the bat. So thank you for all the things that you're doing, Chris. A couple things jumped out at me. You mentioned about people with disabilities not being able to say, be at home, for instance, and not being able to count as quorum for a meeting. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to reference, that it can be so in certain situations where you need to approve minutes or something, even something small as that, and I think it makes it hard to recruit people, if it's a governing body, to be part of that. I know there's some flexibility in other areas, but with like government, it can be a challenge because that person, really, it's hard for them to come to the meeting and things like that. So in a way, it kind of like motivates people not to have them part of the committee, because it may be too much of a hindrance for them, which is bad, but it's just something that another hurdle that people have to face if they want to be involved. Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. I had thought about that before too. So for instance, the last IDA meeting, because I just had knee surgery, I could participate and vote, but I couldn't count towards the quorum. And actually, they needed that one person, and they couldn't conduct their business.
Oh, wow.
Because I was remote, and I couldn't come in. And I couldn't get to a public place to be able to list the address, which if you can list the address, then you can count towards the quorum if you put it in the agenda the week before and you post that. So I'll bring that up next time I talk to Leah Webb or Anna Kellis, at the state, because that's where I think that law would need to change.
Yeah, great. Thank
you for bringing that up. And thanks for bringing up the transportation issues. I thought there was one more thing, but I can't think of it, so go ahead.
Right. Yeah, thanks for the update, Chris. How are you sharing the information as it relates to the Youth Employment Resource Team, if I got that correct?
Yeah.
You know, I think the solutions to share with the community, sort of what issues are facing youth employment, you know, what are the mechanisms and avenues to get that back out to the employers, and then also serve as an opportunity to share and educate youth on, you know, what it means to be an employee and what they should expect from their employer and what their employer should expect from them, and, you know, and those type of things. What are the avenues to sort of reach employee and employer?
Yeah, no, that's really a great question. So right now we're more in like the beginning stages of this and really narrowing down where we're going to focus. But I think that's a great question. But really, I mean, I'm open to all suggestions and comments, and that those are good points. So I really think the plan would just be making sure we have the right community members involved and like the right players involved, and obviously coordination with y'all would be good, and then other businesses and other people getting their perspective, because I could see where it's not just like, you know, like like a guide that has more to it, you know, maybe input from youth, input from businesses, like different things that they're looking towards. So that's really something that we can kind of just add into that too. It just doesn't have to be something smaller. It could be something bigger that really has the input from all over the place. So yeah, definitely, like, I appreciate the comments, and that's something that we will add into it.
Yeah, I think it would be great, you know, how to be a good employer of youth, or, you know, how to create opportunities, youth employment opportunities within your business. You know, those type of communications I think would be really helpful for employers, and then also a good opportunity to encourage, you know, youth in our schools to be looking for jobs if they're not already, or to think about employment or what might be interesting to them. So hopefully that's a well-rounded conversation and approach. The last thing I would say is, and I can reach out to Danny too. I know you see Danny probably more than most of us.
Yeah.
Since you're in the same office.
Yeah.
I would just, you know, ask, I think I will hopefully speak for everybody on this committee, but would love an opportunity to learn more with the summer cohort and the direct to work program. You know, so if there is an opportunity for us to interact with that cohort in any way, or just stop in and say hello, or sit in on a session, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't need to be all 5 of us, but you know, we're happy to accept an invitation, or we're happy to reach out for an opportunity, but would like that. And then also, as you look at like the healthcare or manufacturing expos, if there's ever an opportunity for members of the legislature or this committee to play a role or to have a presence, don't be shy, speak up, ask, and if it's something that we can support, please let us know.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I'm sure Danny's watching now, so I'm sure she's excited about that. And then with the expos, yeah, please come if you're able to come, actually. That would be great. And I can reach out to y'all with more information about that. That would be great, just to interact with the youth and kind of just see what's going on. And then, of course, if you have any other suggestions for how it's run and like what we could add or something like that, that'd be great. Yeah,
if I could just ask you to keep us as a committee informed of dates and things like that as things get closer, I would appreciate it.
I definitely will.
All right. Well, anything else on discussion points or topics? Angie, do you have something else?
I reviewed my notes. And the other question I had was for the consortium, the Micron Consortium.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of participants. Are Cornell and IC included in that?
I'm actually not sure about IC or Cornell. Like at the current meeting, I didn't see representatives from there, but they may be involved with it. I'll have to go back and see the list because there's probably at least 50 names on the list.
Okay.
But I would think that they probably would in some capacity. I can follow up with a consortium about that if they're not on the list, but I would think they are.
Yeah, I don't know if it's this specific one, but I know that there was some engagement around the Institutes of Higher Learning in the region and how they'll play a role in supporting and training. So it may be separate from the economic development piece. I'm not really sure of all the pieces, but I do know that there's been some conversation in that realm around Micron.
Yeah, because I think they briefly mentioned something about curriculum development and things like that related to engineering and some of like the technical skills stuff going on. So that may be what you're talking about probably, but I can follow up with them and confirm that. I'm 99.9% that's it, but I just want to make sure. So I'll follow up with you about that.
All right, thanks, Chris.
All right, appreciate it, Chris. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner of Planning and Sustainability, Katie, if you want to make your way. But if you want to make your way over.
I have one thing to update people on. You probably remember.
Can you pull the mic in?
Thank you.
Good for the recording.
Yeah, thank you. The legislature put $15,000 in our department's budget in 2023 to fund the Housing Affordability and Supportive Infrastructure Grant Program. It's a rolling program. We check the portal once a month to see who's applied. In April, we had one application from the Village of Dryden. And the legislature authorized me to approve grants of $5,000 or less. They applied for $5,000 to hire a consultant to be a grant writer and potentially administrator to create and submit proposals for 2023 Community Development Block Grant Housing Rehabilitation Program. So they're going to be working to improve existing housing in the village with a focus on low-income homeowners, elderly, physically disabled, and veterans. So that's my only report piece for today.
Great use of that money.
Sorry, I'm trying to take notes here faster than.
I'll take over. Anything else that you have for us?
Thanks, Ann. No, that's great. I would. I'd be curious to know, and I know this may be difficult to track, or maybe it's something you already do, but the results of that investment in a grant writer, if they are successful in that grant program, would love to hear what those, what that $5,000 equated into, so we can continue to make the case to support that type of initiative.
Definitely track that, and I know last budget I presented those statistics for you, but it's pretty significant. These CDBG can be $500,000 of investment in the village for a $5,000 investment by the county.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. Mike?
How much money's left in that program?
10,000.
10,000.
And that's rolling, so first come, first serve, however
Yep.
folks apply.
As long as there's eligibility criteria and all of that, but yeah.
Any other questions for Katie? Okay. Well, thanks, Katie. I think next we have Elliot with the Community Housing Development Fund Round 23 Awards Report, ID 11656.
Afternoon. So I just wanted to give a quick report on the results of our last Community Housing Development Fund round, and also provide some information about the procedure for authorizing the disbursement of those funds when the time comes. So just some quick background. The Community Housing Development Fund is a joint effort of partners Tompkins County, the City of Ithaca, and Cornell University, as well as 2 associate members, Town of Ithaca and Town of Dryden, to fund the creation of affordable housing units. So we held the most recent round, which was round 23, from January 23rd to February 23rd. And I provided a memo for you summarizing the results. For the first time in this round, we received the first installment from the developer contributions under the IDA workforce housing policy. So developers receiving IDA incentives either have to build on-site affordable housing units or pay into the CHDF, and there's a little bit more information about that in the memo. So we received the first installment, which was $230,000. That was from the developer of the lofts at 401 East State Street. So we ended up with a total amount of available funding in this round for a little over $585,000. We received 4 applications, and 3 of those were recommended for funding. Habitat for Humanity's Dart Drive and Plain Street Scatter Site project was recommended for $170,000, and that proposes 2 single-family homes in the village of Lansing, and then 2 semi-attached homes on a site in the city of Ithaca. Next, among the recommended projects was INHS's Trumansburg for sale townhomes, phase 2. That was for 6 affordable townhomes for sale. And the recommended award is $360,000. And that's part of the larger Village Grove affordable housing project in Trumansburg. INHS also had an application for the Beacon, a multifamily project on Inlet Island. Also recommended for an award, this one for $300,000. And this project will have, and I should mention that's a provisional award. So it depends on the CHDF receiving sufficient funds from the developer contributions, which are anticipated this year. So the Program Oversight Committee put that condition on that award. And that'll be, the proposal is for 55 units, rental units, including 9 set-aside units for people exiting homelessness. And then finally, 1 application was not recommended for funding, which was Cuba International's proposal for 5 single-family homes as part of an agricultural co-op in the town of Danby. So those were the awards, and then just to quickly go over what the next steps are. So all the disbursements of the awards require authorization from the funding partner that has money in the award. So just to give an example, Habitat for Humanity was funded in part by City of Ithaca funds. So the City Common Council would have to pass a resolution authorizing that disbursement. And then DPS invoices the city for the funds, which get deposited into the CHDF account before being dispersed to the developer. And I also wanted to note that the IDA developer funds will be treated like county funds, so they'll go through the same process, so they will require county legislature authorization before we disperse that. So if there are normal county funds or IDA developer payment funds in the mix, then we need to get the seeker documentation, the environmental review from the developer. And then after that, we can bring the resolution to you to authorize disbursement of those funds. And after that, we execute a contract with the awardee and with the condition that they have to provide a building permit before we can disperse the funds. And then we do so. So that'll be the next steps. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I appreciate the clarity. The reason Elliot took the time to go through that is, as we were putting the agenda together, I had some questions on the process, versus a report, or does it need to be a resolution? So that clarity is helpful. And the idea is that, so once the seeker is completed and we're to a point where we're getting ready to disperse the funds, that's when the legislature would vote on any of the county funds that would be dispersed, or the respective partners would vote to disperse their funds to the project.
Right. And all 3 projects had IDA developer payment funds involved, so we will come back to you for resolutions for all 3 of these.
And so those will be sort of on an individual basis, not, or could be collectively?
It might be all together, but yeah, probably on an individual basis, yeah.
Okay. Veronica?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the in-depth explanation. It was so good that I followed it clearly, and now I have 3 questions. Apologies. One is, I see the IDA funds can only be awarded to projects that serve households making up to 80% AMI. how does that compare to a restriction on the CHDF funds generally?
Yeah, so for county funds, so as I explained, the awards are typically made up of a combination of funds from the different partners. So county funds, and I don't know the source of this, but, well, actually it's because it's originally federal funding that we're using that was repurposed. So any county funds can only fund up to 80% AMI projects. And so since, and actually I don't know what the decision point was that established this, but since the county funds are being treated as county funds, that same restriction applies.
Okay, cool, thank you. I see Megan on video. I don't know if she has something.
Yeah, I'll just add, because these funds are deriving from the IDA's workforce housing policy, that's also where the 80% from their perspective comes from, in addition to what Elliot is talking about in terms of the county's original contribution to the housing fund deriving from HUD program income funds that are restricted to up to 80% of area median income as well.
Okay, thank you. Second question is, I've been hearing about the this option in the IDA projects to pay into the Community Housing Development Fund for years now, and so I guess I'm kind of surprised this is the first round to include the funding. So what's the process like prior to the money being able to be awarded through?
Yeah, I mean, that's a process that's done through the IDA. So I know they might be able to better explain, but basically my understanding is it's negotiated on a project-by-project basis. So so for certain projects, it might be when they close on the property, it might be when they complete construction. It differs, so I think it was just, they established the policy, and then there was a lag to a point when a project reached the point where they had agreed to make the contribution.
Okay, thank you. And last question, I have talked with a lot of people who are have different views on whether the $5,000 per project unit is enough coming from the IDA, and the argument in support of it has been that, it leverages other funds to build more housing, more dollars worth of housing. And I'm wondering, is there a way to track the results of these funds through the Community Housing Development Fund projects to, maybe years from now get a number of this much money created this much value?
From the IDA? Just
Yeah.
keep that separate?
Yeah, the IDA dollars specifically. I don't know if you track what kind of stats you have on just all the fund dollars.
Yeah, we keep track of things based on, with the source of the fund. So yeah, that's something we could compile going forward.
It would probably need to be kind of proportional for the percentage of IDA money that went in for that funding round or something like that. But yeah, we could come up with a methodology.
Okay, that'd be awesome, because I know a lot of folks who'd be interested in that, including me.
Can you just restate that for me, just so I want to make sure I capture that, and then we can follow up on that too.
You want me to restate it? Make sure I understood what you were saying?
Yeah, go for it.
What I understood was for the dollars flowing into this program from the IDA housing policy, that we would start to track the number of housing units that were supported with those dollars. So you'd have the contributions from the county, from the city, from Cornell, from our associates, and the IDA, and somehow kind of divvy up the number of units funded in that housing round proportionally for the dollars put in by IDA.
Yes, and I'm interested in if to whatever extent you can count it, how many more dollars were brought into affordable housing projects because of the leveraging of IDA funds. I don't know the details of how one leverages funds for things, but I know it's everyone's favorite activity.
We do that already for the program. So again, it would just be proportional based on the percentage that was put in from that pot of money.
Right, good. This is why we do that exercise, so we're all on the same page. That's a great question, and it would be interesting to look at that. So as we move forward, hopefully we can, I don't know with what frequency, but incorporate those type of metrics into the conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ann?
Yeah, thanks for that report, Elliot. I'll bring up, since I'm chair of the Community Housing Development Fund, I'll make sure I'll bring up Teresa's comments regarding, where the money's flowing from the IDA. Looking at, and participating in this last round, seeing a good chunk of the money going to for sale units. It's, where, as far as I'm concerned, just my opinion, wherever they are in the county, it's really hard to get for affordable for sale units. So that's where a portion of that money went. Let's see, and thanks for breaking it out in here, which is IDA funds in the chart. And then once, if you're breaking out those figures separately for the IDA, then maybe, I don't know, once at the end of the year or something, if that's something you could report to the IDA, like here's where your dollars went. So that would be good information for them to kind of have in their records, in their minutes, possibly. And then, and the last thing is, I know Travis is the alternate to the Community Housing Development Fund. Is he looped in now he's in the bathroom now, but hopefully he'll start coming to those meetings. He's looped in now?
Yeah, he's on our mailing list. And
Okay. All right, great. Thank you very much for this report.
All right, any other questions for Elliot? All right, thanks, Elliot, appreciate it. Next up on the agenda, we have a report discussion, FEMA firm process update ID 11666, and that's Abigail Connor.
Hi there.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Just coming back around, I know I reported out last meeting and it was a request to have an additional update this meeting. So what I just wanted to offer was, we had those 2 FEMA open houses last week. We had over 200 folks attend, which we were very excited about across the 2 days. And I would just note, after that process closed out, we can say that we have strong lines of communication into FEMA and the DEC, and it's very beneficial. Now we're working to get clear FAQs through them just to fully understand. I think they're coming out of this process. We've understood that the language they use is complicated just because it's what they need to use, but we're just trying to find ways to make sure it's really clear to the public, and there's a resource on our website that they can access to understand those things. And along with that, great idea from Dominic, we've helped train 211 on the resources and on our page. So they are trained, I think they're finishing up that training now with their staff on the map to answer questions about the map for folks who maybe don't have access to the internet or don't know how to use a ArcGIS map, which was the real goal there. To turn those layers on and off and answer some questions and know where to direct people is the real goal with that one.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
I tried to use it, and it definitely was a little bit like a video game for a minute. And I think you had some helpful instructions on the website or in one of the emails that went out. So that was, it did definitely help me try to navigate that. So I'm sure others struggled as well. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, we do have our guide on the webpage with the tool, which is helpful if you're able to get that far with it. But
Of course.
It was a shown need that we needed to go a step farther there.
Great. I know, Mike Sigler, you had a chance to go to one or both of them, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
I don't know if any other of my colleagues were able to attend. Any thoughts from you, Mike, on the
The one
open houses?
downtown certainly better attended than the one up on the hill, but that was to be expected. I mean, it's 800 homes in the city of Ithaca. I mean, it's everything on Meadow Street. It will impact all future construction, which I guess is fine, but I mean, it's going to be expensive. I mean, if you're a homeowner in the city of Ithaca and you're in this floodplain, you can expect to bill $300 more a month, let's say. And it's the people that, frankly, can least afford it in a lot of these areas. And it's just a giant money suck out of the city. I mean, it's going to be about $3 million out of the city every year. that doesn't go to anything except for, insurance. There is a plan, the city has one. I don't know how much support it has on Common Council, but it is a $12 million plan, Mike Thorne. It includes, they have to do the inlet. That's only a small part of it. Even if you did the inlet, that would not mitigate the problem. I mean, you still have a large problem. If you were to do that, though, and you were to do this other dredging with the creeks and to build up certain walls, he believes he can get the entire city almost out of the floodplain, and then you won't. I mean, that's good. Then you won't have a flood, right? A lot of those folks then would not need flood insurance. That's what the city is working on it. He seems to think he can get grant money for that $12 million. Did that cover it? That was a good summary. All right.
I saw Katie nodding. Is that? I mean.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think, just to make you all aware, it was a great partnership with the city. Our staff worked very closely with city staff. We both had tables at the open houses. The city's, I would say, was perhaps more enthusiastically supported than our table or visited. But people were very interested in knowing what the city's plans were. They have been proactive to try. They saw this coming, and they are trying to address it proactively. So I just wanted to let you know it was, we coordinated weekly with the city moving forward to make sure we were on the same page and answering questions consistently and that type of thing.
What's this plan that would seem to help alleviate some of this? Where is that in the process, or can you speak at all to a mitigation plan on behalf of the city?
I can try, but I will say to people listening that you would want to talk to Mike Thorne about the details. But it wrapped up in 2019. Their study was with Barton and LaJudas. They did a study of all the different things they could do to try to ameliorate flooding in the city, including dredging, building wetlands, building berms, building walls along the creeks, doing a bunch of different things. And the conclusion was there isn't one thing that's going to solve the problem. You need multiple approaches. The city's applied for funding for the $12 million or in that ballpark to try to implement some of the solutions, and they're hopeful that they're going to maybe this summer or this fall get that money and be able to start design.
And that money would come from?
Is that a BRIC grant?
Yeah, they applied for FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant. BRIC.
Okay, all these acronyms. Mike?
I mean, I don't want to have people think I'm overstating the issue. I mean, of all the issues that are facing the city right now, I would say for a homeowner or for a tenant, this is right up there. I mean, it's in the top three.
Sure.
It's, that $400, $300 a month, it's got to come from somewhere. So if you're a tenant, it's going to get tacked on.
Real money.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a small amount of money. I mean, it's not like you're going to be paying flood insurance like they do in the Jersey Shore or something. But I mean, it is significant. It's not, so, I'm glad the city is talking about that. But if you go to look at the biggest problem is not the level of the lake. Right now, the lake's really high. I just drove by, I was like, wow, it's high. You would know better than probably most. But that's not actually the main concern. It seems like the main concern is actually getting the water through the city. And that's, some people would like to go a community reporting strategy at City Hall. That they could do that too. That would lower the cost of insurance perhaps, but then there are other people that want to do an engineering solution. So I don't know which will win out in the end, but it certainly seems like, I mean, I looked at the maps Mike was presenting and it was like, I was surprised that could be that effective, but
and then so
he's the engineer, I'm not, so I was glad to see that it's that effective.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if this is a peak or.
I was just thinking that of maybe someone could come from the city to peak or HED to.
Yeah, it seems like it has a nice crossover in somewhere between the two. How quickly, if there were mitigation efforts made, could FEMA reassess? Because it seems like it's taking quite some time, or maybe it's just taking time to, maybe the maps were the easy part and the communication was what took time. How quickly could that could that change potentially? I mean, is that something that they do on an annual basis, or they're able to pivot that quickly?
Thing called a LOMA, Letter of Map Adjustment Amendment.
Another acronym.
Yeah. So my understanding is that the city would need to build these walls as part of the mitigation. But after they're built and they're functioning, they could submit a LOMA to FEMA to try to get the city properties out of the floodplain. But I believe that it will at least be a year or two before that could happen, where the maps are in effect. Homeowners are needing to pay flood insurance before they could be removed. So there's at least a year or two of pain there before anything can be fixed.
Yeah, and the city will need to, once the walls are built or whatever project is completed, they'll need to complete a new study to send into comparison of the study that built the maps that we currently have from FEMA. You need the technical data to go with that letter of map amendment.
And the technical data responsibility is on the municipality or the requesting LOMA agency?
The LOMA, yeah.
The LOMA AE, yeah.
LOMA agency.
Yeah. Ann, and then I have one last question.
Thanks. I was just wanted to add, to like say what Mike was saying. I agree with everything you're saying about, how this affects our residents. And I just want to add on top of that, not minimize that at all, but dealing a lot with some of my friends in Florida, that the amount is similar to what people are paying in hurricane areas in Florida, so it's a huge amount. And talking with people down there, even though it's a big amount, they look at it as they've been hit before, so they want the insurance, even though it costs a lot. So we need to look at, too, just that aspect of we're not used to huge flooding events here, but it could happen. So we don't have that, that memory of it recently. And I think we'd be really glad if something did happen that residents did have the insurance so that they weren't totally wiped out. So that's just one part of that. I'm not saying, we still need to do everything and maybe have somebody come, to HED or Peak and see if there's ways we can help support, the city doing everything that they can.
Travis?
Well, Annie, I appreciate that. I do live in that area, and I'm sure Veronica's heard from a lot of her constituents being in Fall Creek. None of us are excited that we're not happy that we'll have to pay this at all. It's a possibly every 100-year deal. We know that our assessments keep going up, county taxes are going up, city taxes going up, and then we're going to get hit with this on top of all of that. I haven't talked to a homeowner yet that feels like, you know what, just in case this happens, I'm glad that we'll have that, because they're getting hit from every angle. And those are, I can't speak for Fall Creek, not overly familiar with a lot of residents in Fall Creek, so I'll leave that up to Veronica. But Mike is right. This is like the lower income area along Meadow Street of of District 1. We have an issue with renters already paying crazy money. And the bigger your building is, the more you're going to have to pay in insurance, and the more that's going to hit people that are renting those properties. So, to be honest with you, I can't even imagine saying to myself, I'm glad I'll have to get this just in case. It's one more thing, and many of us in that area struggle, including folks that are doing well, to keep their property. Some people's taxes are what their mortgage is, if not more. And this is going to add a whole different level to that. So it's not exciting. It doesn't feel good in any way. And I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but I haven't met anybody who's like feeling that way.
Yeah, can I respond to that one?
Yeah, well, please.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. And I think we're hearing each other. And I think if we just thought if it was an unfair insurance, that we would say we would be doing something different. We might be fighting back with the state to say, hey, we don't think people should pay it. We're not saying that. we're saying we need to, it's real, the hazard is real, let's deal with it, you know, as best we can to help either lower or get rid of that risk, and then get rid of or lower that insurance for people.
The last time I did talk to Mike after he came to the last meeting we had, we talked about 2 weeks later, Mike Thorne, and they're just waiting. They've been waiting for a while to hear back from FEMA to find out whether they got the money or not, and that's kind of like where they are.
Any idea when they issue those grants?
So I'm now remembering, based on that a part of what they applied for was also the hazard mitigation grant program. And those were submitted, I believe, in July, so they should be hearing soon about that one. But if they get declined there, they also submitted the same application for the Building Resilient and Infrastructure Community Grant, and that they should hear in September.
Got it. Okay. So maybe we, because we've had quite a bit of discussion in this committee already, and Ann, I'm happy to talk to you. We can coordinate between the two committees, but maybe look to July or August or sometime in the next couple of months to maybe get an update from the city, because this does have a greater community-wide impact, and if there's a way that we can be any more supportive or apply any positive pressure to any of our elected officials at different levels of government, happy to do so. The last question I had, and you thought this was going to be a short update, was on dredging and the inlet. Was there any conversation or timeline shared or status update? Because I know that's every time I see Mike Sigler, he brings it up. It seems like it's a hot topic, but just wanted to see if there was more detail.
So Dan Fuller from the DEC was the specialist there representing that. He was inundated with people, so I didn't have the chance to speak with him, but I do have an email out to him for a follow-up. I will say that FEMA's stance on the dredging of the inlet is that it is a temporary fix, because at any time, even if the dredging happens, that could fill back in based on any sort of events. So that is FEMA's stance on it, but I can give a follow-up to you all when I hear from Dan Fuller from the DEC.
Okay. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks for the hard work. All right, next we have a presentation, Expanding Broadband Access, presentation by ECC Technologies, ID 11642. And I'm guessing, Nick, you're going to help lead that discussion?
Yeah. We have some guests who will be joining us by Zoom. While they're getting set up, I'll do a little brief introduction of how we got here. So for the past 9 months, the county has been working with ECC Technologies to develop solutions and come up with ideas on how we can expand broadband availability to the unserved locations within the county. As a part of that process, they've been helping to deploy a survey, the Broadband Availability and Access Tool. They've been working with our local providers, the ISPs in the area, to understand their expansion plans and their situations. And they've been performing ground truthing research to look at where broadband infrastructure currently exists in the county. So following up on all this, we're now at a point where we are ready to present some options for the county to move forward with. And as such, we wanted to get our partners at ECC in front of this committee to sort of explain how we got here and kind of outline what those options look like. I'll let Joe Starks here take it from here.
Great. Can you hear me?
We can.
It sounds like that was a commercial about 15 years ago. Can you hear me now? Yeah. I'm going to try to share my screen. If it works, great. I've been working out of the North Carolina office this week, so that's why I'm not there in person. All right, let's find it.
Joe, while you're working on that, Katie or Nick, with this funding for this exercise, this project, was that from a Southern Tier 8 grant, or was it county-directed funding, or where did?
Through the county legislature put money in our budget to contract with ECC for professional advice.
Got it, okay. Did we have a ST8 for broadband?
We did, but it wasn't funded. It was for the whole region.
Okay. Okay,
Great.
all right, I just want to make sure I'm not confusing the two. Thanks.
Can you see my screen okay?
We can.
Okay, good. I'm going to try not to show you my vacation pictures, but sometimes they pop up. So anyway, thanks for having me. Thank you for your time. And I'm going to summarize what we've done to date. And, please feel free to ask as many questions as you have. This is a very important topic. If you need me to speak louder, I can. Basically, ECC Technologies, we've been around for over 25, close to 27 years, dealing with broadband issues. We've got a lot of experience in this area. We've got over $3 billion in technology development, and that includes starting companies broadband companies that we've owned and sold, as well as working with communities from Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, which is the northernmost outpost of human civilization there, to Nome, to Florida, to New England. So we've covered the United States pretty well, not to mention some of the territories, and also some work in Canada and Europe as well. We are entrepreneurial in spirit, and we are credited with starting several broadband startups and businesses. And the one thing that we can say is that every single one of these that we've done over the past 25 years is still operating successfully today. So we attribute, first of all, our team to that, and their ability to understand and write good, solid business sense practices. And we also attribute that to our customers, who have a great understanding of what we're dealing with in terms of broadband. So here's what we've achieved so far for Tompkins County. From the mapping and analysis side, we've reviewed the New York State and the FCC broadband maps. We've compared them. We've validated to some extent with our own data. We've completed analysis of the available broadband infrastructure within the county to the address level. We've defined providers and the types of infrastructure that they have throughout the county, and there are a number of them. We created a new detailed broadband map, address level map for the county, so you know which addresses have broadband, which do not. We've identified unserved, underserved, and more important, or equally as importantly, roads that are not served at all. And, we've heard some conversations about development here earlier. Very important that roads that do not have infrastructure are not shadowed, because eventually someone's going to want to build a house or something on those roads. And it's going to be very important that we understand how to get them the infrastructure they need. And then we've physically verified broadband availability at the address by going to those addresses and mapping them, so we've physically seen them and can say they're there or they're not there. And I'd like to qualify that because it's to the extent possible. Often facilities and infrastructure are fed from the back lot of a house. Sometimes they come through the woods. We do not walk on private property. However, if we can verify that it's there, then we document it. If we can't see it, then we can't obviously document it. And we've reviewed existing providers, networks, and infrastructure. And you're going to see a little bit of that here in a minute. So we understand where they are today and what it's going to take to finish the job. From a community standpoint, we've engaged the local internet service providers. We've engaged stakeholders for input and assistance. We've also evaluated and provide information from our broadband availability and adoption tool, also known as BAT. We've got that from the county, and we've also used what we were able to gather for the state. You may or may not be aware that we did the statewide broadband assessment last year, where we did similar across the state than what we have done for you, and created the New York State broadband website. We've developed some options that we're going to share in a minute on expanding broadband service, and we've summarized at a high level some of the funding sources that are available. So the map you're looking at now, if you look at the green dots, those are addresses that do not have access to broadband infrastructure. And if you look at the red lines that you'll see, that's what it will take to get those homes or those addresses connected to the nearest infrastructure. So we've done this by mapping the existing infrastructure that's out there. So we're able to identify exactly how much infrastructure is required to solve the problems currently existing in the county. There are 1,216 addresses can be seen on this map. It requires 116 miles of additional infrastructure, i.e. the red lines, extending from existing infrastructure to bring fiber services to these green dots or these unserved addresses. And the estimated cost to do this right now is approximately $7 million. There's some considerations that you have to think about when you're evaluating the options. First of all, you know, the underserved locations are equally as bad in some cases as unserved, because if you can't get access to high-speed broadband, then it really doesn't do you a lot of good with many of the applications that are being promoted today. So we can't neglect that there are unserved and underserved. And the other part of this as well is what are the adoption issues, which are in many cases more complicated and more prior or larger than the availability issues. You may possibly be able to use a single option to solve this problem countywide, but you can't be guaranteed of that, so you may be required to come up with multiple options. You will be required to provide some financial support. Ownership of investments can be explored, and by that I mean if the county is building fiber optic infrastructure for other reasons, let's say public safety towers, interconnecting of municipal office locations, school districts, etc., then they feed very well into a broadband expansion program. And the other, probably one of the more important things is that internet service providers, they will be your partners. They want to be your partners. So you want to keep that in mind, and you want to have constant communications. Some grant ideas that are out there. We've all heard of the NTIA. We've all heard of the BEAD program. I think it's $47 billion. The New York State program is out there for $1 billion. I mentioned fiber for public safety. So building a fiber infrastructure for public safety towers is an option. The Department of Agriculture and the Reconnect grants are certainly options, and there are some in New York State, and there's others as well, including private investment. So let's talk for a moment about some possible solutions. Option 1 and 2 are very similar. The difference being that option 1, if the bidding or the procurement laws of the county dictate that you would bid a project, then what you would do is you would release an RFP for providers to bring infrastructure to those unserved homes. That estimated cost would be about $7 million. We expect that if that were to happen, that the providers themselves would pony up some of that money, maybe as much as 50%. So we're giving you the all-in number, but talking to the providers about what they would actually provide, that would be served. That would need to be seen. So some of the advantage of this are that you're going to get 100% of your homes served. You're also going to get the possibility of competitive providers. And I'll give you a few examples here, I believe on the next slide. You're going to get...
Excuse me just for 1 second. Would you mind making your presentation a little bit bigger or hitting the full screen? But it's just...
let's see. Yep, let me try this. Did that work?
No, if you go down to the right corner, just where that slide is, keep going down a little bit further, then over to the right, 3 buttons. Hit that button.
That one, okay. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay, now I can't see my presentation. Anyway, that's okay. So some of the advantages of this are that you can get some competition in the county, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Some of the disadvantages of this is that the county's going to lay out some money, and you're probably not going to get it back. But the good thing about that is the BEAD program is going to pay for a lot of this, so it may not actually be tax dollars that you're dealing with. Option 2 is direct negotiation with the broadband providers. You know who they are, we know who they are. We've identified areas within each of their service territories and footprints that do not have access. They would like to provide access to those locations. However, the cost to do so is so expensive that they can't get a return on investment. We all know about that. The option 3 is public-private partnerships. It's $21 million, and I'll explain why it's so much higher on that than option 1 or 2. But essentially, that is the county building infrastructure. And if the county has to build infrastructure out to provide service to these unserved homes, then you've got to start from the center and work out. So you've got to replace what the providers already have in place, which is called backbone. So net backbone is essentially $14 million, which is option 4. And we talk about the open access model, building fiber for public safety towers, education. Some of you may be aware of the Southern Tier Network. All right, we developed the Southern Tier Network as an open access model, and broadband providers then build fiber off that to the home and to the markets that they want to serve. So it becomes a community-based network that allows competition across all phases. So essentially then, you know, what we're looking at is solutions right now. There are 2 real viable solutions that can be implemented relatively quickly. Option 1 is to release an RFP for broadband providers to fill the gaps. Divide the county into sections, and I'm going to show you that in a second. The county initiates an RFP to solicit from the providers to build fiber infrastructure to those unserved locations. The county will need to think about what kind of financial support will be provided, and then also the amount of financial support that's going to be provided and where you're going to get it from. County grants, the ISP will provide money, private investment, et cetera. They're all on the table for this. And the examples that are close by that we can discuss on that are, one is Onondaga County. Onondaga County did release an RFP to broadband providers that were providing services within the county. Verizon won, and the county and Verizon negotiated a contract where Verizon is now building fiber, even in some places outside of their service territory, to provide fiber broadband access to unserved locations within the county. The second location that we can point to on this is Wayne County. Wayne County did a similar release of an RFP, and they awarded to Spectrum. And Spectrum is now building fiber broadband infrastructure to every single location in the county that does not have it. And again, the counties each have committed dollars in this case. Onondaga County had $15 million in capital funds. They provided, or Verizon required, 11 million, and Verizon's providing 7 million. And I'm not really sure the details on Wayne County, but I know the numbers are similar in that case. Here's what it might look like in terms of a map. So if you take a look at how you would want to do this, if you broke it down into regions, such as shown here, then it sometimes becomes a little bit easier for the providers to buy into this. Not necessarily have to, but you could award to 3 different providers in a case like this. So, and I think the one thing to keep in mind with option 1 and 2 is you can do the RFP, or you can do the negotiations with the providers while you're looking for the money because you're going to need to know how much money this is going to require and whether we do it through an application for a BEAD grant or we do it through a Reconnect USDA grant. And we still need to know those numbers. So getting the partners on board early is a key to these. This is just one example of how you could break the county up into 3 sections, but you wouldn't necessarily have to. It makes it easier for the providers. Option 2 is direct negotiation with the providers themselves. They own the service territories. They've already got infrastructure in those locations. As I stated, and as they will tell you themselves, is they would like to build out to those locations. They just can't afford to do it and get the return on investment that they need to keep afloat. So in this case, the fiber we would require in all cases, whatever gets built would be fiber optics, not copper or coax based. The county would need to consider what kind of financial support you would be providing, either on option 1 or option 2. And Greene County has implemented this model. What they've done is they've sat down with each one of the providers and said, these are the homes in your service territory. What's it going to take to connect them? And then I think the benefit to the county on this is they already know the answer on what's it going to take to connect them. They know how much money it's going to cost. So if the providers tried to give them a number that was way out of line, they'll know it. They already know it. So some of the benefits of doing this in this particular case is this frees you up a little bit because the county is providing money and you're going to help subsidize the build out of these locations. It's reasonable for the county to ask for access to some of the fiber. 3 years ago, they would have shut the door on you. They would not have allowed that. Now they will, and now they are considering that because the counties are each putting so much dollars into it. And by access to the fiber, that allows you to look at cost avoidance issues. You know, what are you doing today? What are you paying for today from a telecommunications standpoint that access to this fiber would eliminate? So it starts to give you, albeit not a lot of return on investment, it is some return on investment. So, and it's something to keep in mind. The downside also of option 2 is that it does somewhat tend to limit competition in these areas because you're going to provide to one broadband provider in each of those regions that we just shown on the map here. So it's not going to really do much for competition, but it will solve the broadband digital divide. A couple of the funding options that are out there today, there's $42.5 billion in BEAD funds. Those are expected to be released or start being released in 2024. I think your community is ahead of the game because you already know what you need and you have time to start putting plans together on how you would go after this money and what you're going to do with it. There's $1 billion available by the Connect All in New York State. Private investors are looking for partnership deals, PPPs, with communities, and they're willing to bring dollars to the table for this. And the providers themselves, they have access to the funds. You might have heard of RDOF funds and stuff. They're out there. The providers can go after those as well. So here's a few of the providers that offer service within the county. Newport Telephone, I would say, they are listed as a service provider, but we're not able to validate that they actually do anything. But we've had conversations with all of these providers over the past year to 2 years, and every one of them would be interested in working with the county on solving this problem. So I would just want you to know that. Questions? Speechless, huh?
So many questions, I'm sure. I'll start with Mike Sigler, and Dan, I don't know if you have any, feel free to join the conversation, please.
I heard a term I was at an economic meeting this morning and I heard a term that I hadn't heard ever really in the discussion of this, and it was, they called it broadband redundancy, because you had two hands kind of working on separate projects. And the company had come in and put all this broadband in, and then there was another person coming in and doing the same thing. And I didn't know if that is part of the consideration of this map. I mean, this map's great. I'd love to send this to my town, because I could send that to the town of Lansing and say, we've only got to cover this many places. How much, you know, how important is that to you? And I think that would be pretty important to the town. So, but I didn't know. I mean, are we kind of, did you find this in your study that now we're having places that have maybe one provider or two provider, or maybe now three providers, and we're still leaving certain pockets kind of unserved at all? So does that question make any sense? That was a lot of words for me to make that question.
That's absolutely why the county has done this, because as I pointed out earlier, these are the addresses, right? We know exactly where these are. We can drive up to the driveway and mailbox of every single one of them. But more importantly, once this is solved, where are those roads that are out there that don't have access to infrastructure? And Wayne County, for example, they've taken a very proactive approach with Spectrum, and they have said, we want infrastructure on every road. Right? Not only do we want all the addresses served, we want infrastructure on every road, because we don't want to have to come back and do this again. And you're absolutely correct when you describe that you might have one provider or two providers. A lot of this area has access to two providers. And in some areas, you can see that there are 2 to 3 or 4 providers actually building fiber infrastructure. You're not going to see it short in the near term in the rural areas, but it's not out of the question in Syracuse and metro areas. You know, the competition is it's getting pretty fierce out there, because the investment dollars that are funding these projects, they're very lucrative. They're making quite a bit of money on them.
Thanks.
Other questions? Dan?
Thank you. I have a bunch. Did all the local ISPs participate with you and cooperate with you?
I'm sorry, what was that? I didn't hear you.
Did all the local ISPs participate in your survey, and did they cooperate? Did they answer your questions?
I did not do the actual interviews with them, and I'm not sure if I see Cameron on this call. He had some problems getting in, but we talk with pretty much all of these ISPs on a regular basis. So I would believe that most, if not all of them, did provide some comments. And, you know, the funny thing about this, when we started doing this 25 years ago, you know, we were bad people. You know, Verizon hated us and Time Warner hated us. Everybody hated us because they thought we were going to put them out of business. But what they've come to realize here more recently is that the data that you're collecting is going to help them get the money that they need to build this infrastructure out. And without it, they're not going to get the money. So they're cooperating more freely than they ever have.
Thank you. My next question is about the map. Can we get the map, and is it usable? Can we see the address level, and can we share it with our towns and such?
I'll refer that to Nick and Katie, but that data is going to be available to the county. And what we would ask that you do is this particular data I don't believe is that critical. However, you know, we do have interactive maps that show where everybody's infrastructure is located, and that would be confidential, business confidential to the providers. So we do not recommend putting that out in public. I think having the addresses and going back to your towns, absolutely.
Yeah, if I could follow up. So my understanding is that if we move forward with the option 1 that was described here and included as a resolution in the packet today, we would be including a map and list of addresses in the request for proposals. So that would effectively be public. So yeah, to Joe's point, the network design of existing facilities will not be disclosed.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not interested in the business part of it. I'm interested because other maps that have come out don't match reality, and I think it'll be up to us to do some ground truthing ourselves. Thank you. Next question. What about the municipal internet plans that are out there? So Dryden is actively building theirs. Town of Caroline is talking about it. How did that fit into this whole, into your work?
There's no easy way to say this, so I'm just going to say it. That is a new project getting off the ground. We have not seen the detailed financials to know if that's viable or not. I'm sure it must be because somebody's funding it, but unless the business has been in operations for a minimum of 5 years, then it's not something we really consider viable at that point, because it's really, it takes 5 years to get these businesses off the ground, 5 to 7 years in some cases. So that might be a good solution in the future, but I don't think you want to wait 5 years to solve this problem.
Thank you, but I guess I'm asking, like, we have at least 2 towns that are pursuing this, and how does that fit into the proposal and the next steps? Like, we don't want to, I would think we wouldn't want to include them in our build out costs and estimates if they're doing it themselves already.
There's 2 ways you can look at that. One is you're absolutely right, because if they have a plan and they're going to do it, then you would want to remove those addresses from this plan. The other part of that is if you've got a broadband provider that's willing to build that for you, does the community necessarily want to do it? You know, some communities say yes, and some communities say no. I don't want to be the one that gets called at 2 o'clock in the morning when my customer's internet locks up. So it really depends on the community themselves and what are they really trying to accomplish, and how hard do they really want to be a broadband provider.
Thanks. I have 2 more questions. May I keep going?
Of course, yeah.
Thank you.
Please.
So let's see, if I got you right, there's about 1,200 addresses and 116 miles of fiber that would need to be built out eventually.
Yes.
And then you talked about the underserved versus no service, and thank you for bringing that up. That's something that gets brought up all the time. Did your figures include the underserved, or was that outside of those numbers that you gave?
That, I'm not sure if it includes all of the underserved, but the infrastructure needed to provide high-speed broadband is what that number includes for those folks that don't have it. And for the folks that have access to high-speed broadband infrastructure, their issue of being underserved may be different. It may be an adoption issue. They can't afford 100 megabits. They want the cheapest possible. Maybe they're not taking advantage of the federal subsidy programs that would enable them. But having the high-speed broadband infrastructure should enable you to get the high-speed broadband that you want. And many of the underserved that we would discuss are probably most likely and definitely not infrastructure related. They are adoption related in most cases.
Just want to make sure I understood what you're saying. You're saying that it basically would take care of the underserved if it's a simple issue of not having access?
Yeah, underserved can be caused by many things, but what you're looking at here with these addresses is they have no access to the infrastructure. So they are completely unserved. Underserved may have access to the infrastructure. Otherwise, they would show up on this map as unserved. But their issues for being underserved may be different than an access. They are different. It might be that perhaps Verizon or the broadband provider has bad service, right? And anyway, sorry about that. I got distracted. So the underserved has access to infrastructure unless they're on this list, then they would be considered unserved.
Thank you.
So yes, your answer to your question is the infrastructure is in place that should solve underserved as well, but that's going to require support by the providers to step up their game.
Okay, and then my last question, you talked about, I think you called them unserved roads and making sure, or talking about that issue of if a building is going to be built in the future, that we want to cover that. I want to make sure I understood what you're talking about and to ask if you calculated that part of it too. Does it, so let me start, make sure I understood what you said. You have the addresses that are underserved, but are you saying that there's other parts of the county that are, I mean, unserved, but there's other parts of the county that may be unserved, but there's no buildings there? Is that what you were suggesting?
Yes, there may be roads, and I'm not sure if how many there are in the county. I can get that information for you, but basically you may have a road that has no buildings on it, no addresses, so to speak. So therefore you would not expect to find infrastructure. But in future, right, you're going to want to make sure that infrastructure can be easily placed there to support someone who might develop a housing development or build a home on it.
So did you also map that out or inventory that in some way?
Yeah, we do have a map with all of the roads that do not have infrastructure on them. And I'm not sure off the top of my head how it aligns with this map, but we can provide that information.
And that's beyond the 116 miles necessary?
That I'm not sure of. Okay. The folks that did this survey are not on the call, so I think I can get you that information as well.
Thank you very much.
I hate doing this, but as chair, it's 4:36, just throwing out a time check for everybody. And we do have a couple more things to do, so if we could stick to about 5 minutes more on the topic. Veronica or Ann?
Well, I gotta condense my thoughts, so you go first.
Ann.
So I'm unclear as far as the underserved, and it doesn't sound like you're able to answer that question, so I would maybe want to continue this conversation. I mean, but we have a...
When you say unclear on underserved...
About the underserved...
What that means?
I understand what underserved means, but I'm unclear whether this proposal is addressing any of the underserved.
Katie?
Let me try to answer that. What I understood Joe to say is that if an address had access to high-speed fiber, they were considered served. If they did not have that, they'd be considered unserved. And many of the underserved would, be included in that group because they don't have high-speed fiber. So they might have an old coax cable or satellite internet or something like that that makes them unserved. But I think what he's also saying is there could be other issues like price points or quality of service that would be unserved, that would not be included in this study.
Okay, so like for instance, on my road, it was only like 2 years ago, we actually got a functional high-speed internet. So before, that would have come under not underserved, but also counted as not served.
Unserved, yep.
Unserved, sorry.
No, it would be considered unserved. And where you would see underserved is when a person is not using high-speed broadband. And you're going to find in many cases that's related to cost.
Sure. You don't need to explain that again. I understand that. I just wanted to clarify that part. Okay. And then the last part that Dan was making, so this RFP does not, we don't know whether this includes getting service on all roads, even if they don't have addresses? I guess I'm not clear on that.
That I'll have to validate that, because the folks that did the calculations are not on the call. But I can get you that answer and then have it available for you tomorrow morning.
Okay, that's all the questions I have right this second.
Veronica.
Thanks. One thing, can we get a copy of this presentation?
Sure.
Thanks. There's definitely slides I'd like to look back at. Thinking of those options, I see we have a resolution to vote on for issuing an RFP, which was like option 1 of that list. I am probably willing to vote that out of committee, but having just seen all this info, I have a lot more questions, and that's probably not the option I would want to go with, given that a lot of the issues raised or some of the issues raised, especially about underserved addresses, are I don't think would be addressed by this at all, is my understanding, and that like the same service providers that are maybe providing bad service now or too expensive would like still be in charge of things. And I also, like, you mentioned a lot of grants. I'm aware of some now, and there might be more coming. I got to sit in last week on a Connect All state program, like digital equity listening session, which they're at the listening stage, but that sounds like it's going in maybe a good direction. Actually, one of the Caroline Town board members was there, like, very fiercely explaining the pervasive lack of internet for a lot of people, and just like the myriad ways that blocks folks from interacting with other systems. Anyway, so I would be interested in exploring, and maybe you've already thought about this, but us building out and owning our own infrastructure and trying to fund that with grants as much as possible. And I guess I'm not seeking answers for now, but a couple questions I had is, in the public safety context, like, what's the state of our, I guess the existing fiber? Well, like, do we have existing fiber that could be plugged into it, or plans on building anymore? Maybe not.
I think it's all cell tower based. We don't have any fiber for our 911 system that I know of.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Okay. And I could be totally misremembering, but didn't we allocate funds for like a grant gathering consultant to the planning department for this year? And
Yes.
if so, is this a direction we could point someone?
Well, this is the group that we are working
These are the funds that we.
This is
Right.
yeah.
And if I could just clarify, the reason that we brought this to you with a resolution was, if we could move quickly on just the RFP, then we could get some more solid dollar figures back, and we were hoping that the timing would allow some of that thinking to go into the county budget process over the course of the summer. So that's what the thinking was. The other thing is, Joe keeps reminding us that Onondaga County went through this process, and now they're under contract, and they're going to have high-speed fiber to every address in that county within 12 to 18 months. I mean, so it's a timing thing, too, which kind of gets to looking at the municipal systems, and, we'd have to make a decision on that, whether we're going to support that or try to do something quicker. I don't know. That's a legislative decision, but that's the thing.
Yeah, you do have options there. First of all, if you were looking at building out a municipal broadband system countywide, there's 47,375 homes, and the average cost to do this would be about $1,700 per home, give or take. That's $80 million. And then on top of that, you've got co-locations and you've got some head-end equipment. So you could be somewhere between $80 and $100 million to build out a municipal broadband system to every address. When we talk about the public safety towers, we're really talking about bringing in an open access fiber network, which would build to every county, would build to, let's see if I can find it here. Essentially would build infrastructure to all of the county locations and be controlled by a local development corporation. That infrastructure would then be used by the providers to build off and into some of these areas. So it's not, how do I put it? It's not something that you can't do later, but you can take a look at option 1 or option 2 and start those. And if you don't get satisfactory results, then move to option 3 or option 4, right? But if you do get satisfactory results, then you're in a position that you want to be in.
Thanks, Joe. If I could ask you just to leave this slide up, I'm going to do something here. If I could just move the resolution on to the floor. So I'm going to move resolution authorization to issue a request for proposal to expand broadband access, doc ID 11643. I'll move that, seconded by Ann Koreman. So now that we have that on the floor, we can discuss the merits of the resolution. I'll weigh in just real quick on my personal thoughts. I always think when there's an opportunity for an ROI on something, for us to recoup funds in some way, we're better off in the long run. I hear, Katie, the points about quickly moving through to try to alleviate this problem as quickly as we can. Fully support that. This really is just asking for proposals from folks that would be interested in option one, right? Correct? And if we don't like what we hear, we put that all in a file cabinet and we can move on to any of the other options. So I think that this is a good first step, personally. This is a place to start. If we don't like what we get, we can continue the conversation about what potentially option 3 or 4 could look like for us, if that's the will of the committee and legislature. And what would be required from the planning department and consultants, et cetera. But that's kind of my take on this. Is it's a good first step. It potentially could solve the problem. It doesn't necessarily solve the affordability and access issues, which we need to continue to work to address. But I would say that summarizes for me this resolution, and that's why I'm happy to move this out of the committee. The only thing I would ask is, Nick, if you could provide this presentation and maybe some additional summary with some of the conversation that we had today to the full legislature, either in a memo or something that we can forward on to the rest of us, to the rest of the group. That would be helpful once this potentially moves on to the rest of the legislature.
Yep. Yeah, we can definitely provide a presentation. Yeah.
We are at 4:46. Are there other comments on the resolution?
Real quick.
I've got Mike or Ann and then Mike.
So hearing that this does not preclude us from working with or the municipalities, I'm going to be for it. Otherwise, I was kind of on the fence, and I do like, to hearing that we need to at least look into this and see what the projections are, and we're at a time where we're looking at budget. So I will vote for this.
Mike.
I was just going to say I'm really glad that we're taking this step. I mean, once we go here and we put out an RFP, then we have something. And because let's face it, I don't think this is going to be county money paying for this. It's going to be probably state. But we need to be able to apply for that money, and this would give us that ability to actually apply for that state and federal money. So
Yeah, can't apply without a plan, right? Katie?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I would say we understand from ECC that although the funds haven't been released from New York State, if you're an early bird and have a great plan, they're looking for great proposals already because they want this money to start flowing.
I mean, from a marketing perspective, that you can say that your county has 100% broadband coverage, that's pretty good. I mean,
I would like to look at the map of the infrastructure that doesn't have addresses on it. I do think that that's important to share, and I think that should continue to be part of the conversation as we talk about housing affordability, the development of housing, especially in rural parts of our community. The infrastructure cost is a consideration, and that's something that I think we need to continue to look at through this. So I get that there's people that live in addresses, but hopefully that there's people that will live in more addresses over time, and we want to make sure that we're addressing that too. If we do that immediately, or if that's a phase 2 or next round of this project, it's definitely something we need to keep top of mind. Seeing no other, Dan?
Just ask a quick timeline, rough timeline of when we think we can get an RFP out the door and when we might hear back.
We are working with ECC on developing the RFP. Joe, I understood from your team you had some ability to get this started and moving relatively quickly. And then once it's out, we would have it out for 3 to 4 weeks. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, generally 3 to 4 weeks is enough.
Are we talking maybe 3 months to get it out the door, or just roughly?
Well, it depends on how quickly you move internally. Onondaga County took 6 months once they had all the proposals back to align everything to get it where they needed it to be. And I would suspect that you're able to move a little bit quicker than they are. So I think, probably 3 to 4 months, maybe sooner.
Joe, is that to release the RFP or to deal with the?
No, to get the responses back and make decisions on which way you'd like to go.
3 to 4 months from when the decision is made to issue the RFP.
To issue the RFP, probably within 4 weeks. We've got all the data. It's really making sure we've got it packaged the way you want it.
So it's about a month to issue the RFP from the time the legislature gives the go-ahead to issue the RFP. And then
that long.
From the time we issue the RFP, it's anywhere from 3 to 6 months before we would be able to act on or make a decision based on what we get back in that RFP.
Right, but we should know what we get back from the RFP about a month after it's issued.
Right.
Perfect. Okay.
So we'll have some budget figures that we can look at.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, 2 months, 1 month for development and then 1 month for response and analysis. So after 2 months, you should have a pretty good idea of which way you want to go. And then your internal time to move it from there forward.
Well, I know our team can move mountains quickly, so.
There you
go. Joe and your team, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your time, Nick and Katie. I know this has been a lot of work, Nick, especially for you, so thank you for that. I look forward to keeping this conversation going. And Joe, if you could follow up with Nick, the presentation and other things, and then I am going to call for a vote on this. So was that what you want to make sure I voted?
I wasn't sure if you were voted yet.
I knew we were getting. I saw that. Wait, you didn't vote. All those in favor of the resolution as proposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you.
I just take the opportunity to thank the legislature for funding these consultants. We could not have done it without expert guidance, so thank you very much for that.
Great, thank you.
Hey, wait a minute, we're getting paid? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow, this is a good day.
Okay on that.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
Thanks,
Mike?
No, and I think we should throw it back to you, too. I mean, you started with nothing. I mean, literally, none of this information existed, and now it's something we can actually take an action on, which is.
I didn't know what a coax cable was versus fiber when we started this.
And Nick, I mean, we'll give you props.
We're getting closer.
Never thought about it.
Maybe we'll have show and tell at the next meeting, Katie.
I was thinking I'm bringing some in. And we don't need you to move any more mountains. We just need you to go over the mountains and into the valleys.
Yes. Dan, thanks for joining for that conversation as well.
I know, I've still got items.
I'm ready to go.
Go ahead. You can go. You can.
All right, Nick, in the time that we have left.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. Yeah, we've got a first quarter update for you in your packet. It's got an update on hotel room occupancy tax for the period from December 1st to February 28th. We've got STPB updates, including work on the draft budget in progress and a lot of work that's happened over the last few months with grant programs. There's also an updated list of upcoming events that, thanks to the county, have been funded, so check for that and mark your calendars. And we are also in RFP world working on a update to the visitor profile study that is over at purchasing for review. So hoping to get that out as soon as they give it the green light. The Convention Visitors Bureau has issued a survey relating to the replacement for the Visitor Arrival to Departure program. There's a link in the memo there, so if you or anyone you know think would be a good person or business to respond to that, please pass that along. And then just a few issues for awareness. Short-term rental. There's bills in the State Assembly and Senate addressing that. And at last I checked, they're still viable. So I'm not sure where they are today, but as of the time of this writing, they were moving forward. And some information about workforce situation in hospitality and leisure. So that's the update. Happy to answer any questions y'all have.
I just think it's good to note that our 2023 room tax collection for quarter one is up by, what is it, about 90,000 or so?
Significantly.
80-some thousand?
Yep.
Anecdotally, probably mostly driven by rates as opposed to increase in occupancy. And then also, just so everybody knows, that additional revenue line is room tax collected outside of the quarter in which it should have otherwise been remitted.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, late payments.
Late payments, otherwise known as late payments. Any questions on the report before we move into the resolution? No? Okay. Just, Nick, you've obviously heard the conversations we've had around STPB at the legislature level. Again, I just think it's important to reiterate here in the committee while we're talking about it, the desire, I think, of many to continue to make sure that fund balances are strong and we can remain resilient as we move forward any uncertain economic times. So hopefully we can encourage the STPB to look at that. And I know that they've improved their policy over the last few years. Was it going from 5%, I think, to 10%?
Yep.
Which is probably not enough based on the number of organizations that count on the STPB and those room tax funds, really the STPB to help guide and recommend those room tax funds, which is what we're distributing. So hopefully we can continue to look at that as we move into budget season, which I know that budget committee is well into the thick of it.
Meeting on Friday, so.
Yeah, I'll see you again on Friday. The next topic we have is the Tompkins Outdoors 2023 Grant Awards, Doc ID 11600. If someone could move that, please. Moved by Ann Koreman, seconded by Veronica Pillar. Nick, I'll turn it over to you for a quick recap of this.
This is the second year we are offering the Tompkins Outdoors Grant. This is a grant intended to improve the capacity of the organizations that support and maintain outdoor recreation assets in the county. I should say assets and programs. We got 6 applications, 5 of which are being recommended for funding for 2023. These are all returning grantees from last year. I think they're offering some excellent programming, and we're looking forward to having them all operate again in the coming year. If you have any questions about this program, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions from members of the committee? I know outdoor recreation is a huge driver for our tourism economy, and this is great that we can continue to make investment in outdoor recreation options. As well as supporting, quality of life for residents throughout the county. So seeing no questions, all those in favor of this resolution? That's like a mic drop for a legislator, right? So that passes unanimously. That brings us to, thank you, Nick and Katie, for your contributions today. Any committee members' reports or items to discuss?
Is there a housing something this weekend? Did you go to a housing thing this weekend?
I went to a housing thing this weekend.
I heard.
I went to a statewide local progress housing policy workshop. It was very interesting, learned a lot of things in a lot of ways going on around the state. And I was not prepared to talk about it and have condensed comments, but.
Maybe next time.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to share those thoughts with the committee or the legislature, would love to hear those. I know Mike Sigler and I, Katie Borgala, and Lisa Holmes. Who else am I missing? Anybody else from the county? Chris Spahn was there as well at the IAED annual meeting this morning, which was really interesting. I'll make sure that we have a couple of additional reports to share with other members of the legislature, but it was really interesting to hear the investment going on in our community. Heard from the CEO, owner of Knickerbocker bed frame manufacturer, which is in Dryden, about why he chose this area and the incredible staff that he's been able to hire through that process. And so that was really great, and heard a lot about the direct work program. So thanks to the IAED staff for putting that on, for members of the county team that were there, and I'll make sure that we get a copy of the report to share out with everybody. Seeing no other comments, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, moved by Mike, seconded by Veronica. All those in favor? All right, have a great afternoon. See everybody at the Mac and Cheese Bowl.